My argument's always been why come here when there's this giant threat is because I have not felt very safe in the US, even around family and friends.
This is my friend Eamon. He's been through one of the roughest times of anyone I've ever met these past few years, but we aren't going to focus on that in this video. When I saw him in Taiwan recently, he was just happy, mentally and physically strong, and he looked completely comfortable with himself and his life that he made here in Taiwan. He was also a huge influence on me to get my life back on track so I can keep making these videos. Eamon is super passionate about languages and teaching. He speaks fluent Mandarin Chinese, and he's taught English in both Asia and America. So I decided to pick his brain on the differences in both teaching and lifestyle, as well as the stereotypes of English teachers in Asia, to see if teaching English is something you can do here for life.
My name's Eamon Devine, and I'm from Kansas, in the Midwest, Lawrence, Kansas.
Can you explain your lifestyle right now? So what do you do right now and where are you?
Right now I'm waiting for my job to start at a public school in Taipei. So I'm not doing much, I'm just kind of chilling for the summer vacation on the east coast of Taiwan in a place called Tocheng, which is in Yilan County.
What's Yilan County for people who don't know?
It's a pretty big county with a lot of nature. They've got surfing, they've got hot springs, river tracing, where people go on hikes by the river and sometimes in the water and creeks. And there are Aboriginals here, so there's like tourism stuff to do to see their villages and see what they eat and their culture and things like that.
Let's talk about your past first. So when you were growing up in high school, what kind of person were you back then? What was your dream growing up?
I was kind of like a hoodlum, I guess. I guess maybe not a hoodlum, but I smoked pot and I partied and I was kind of a rebel, you know, and a troublemaker at times and didn't get great grades. My dream probably at that time was to just like live in my hometown maybe and just work at a restaurant or maybe a grocery store, something very simple. I don't remember having like big aspirations at all.
What would high school Eamon think of Eamon who's living in Taiwan, like teaching English? You're kind of starting your own, like a new life here, right?
I think I'd be blown away. It would have been unimaginable to me at the time that I would like have learned Chinese and been to the places that I've been to and live here now with the intention of maybe permanently living here.
Sorry, you're fluent in Mandarin Chinese?
Yeah.
How did you learn that? People might be curious. So.
I discovered that I was like pretty good at learning foreign languages when I learned Spanish. When I was in my 20s, I was going to go to Costa Rica, study Spanish at a program there. I was really good at Spanish. And then when I went to university, again, much later, like in my mid-20s, I decided I wanted to switch to another language, and I went to school and they had a Mandarin courses there. I took it like really seriously and delved in really deep and like tried to immerse myself as much as I could with TV shows and people who were native speakers and stuff like that. The courses helped, the foundational knowledge, but being really serious about it and studying in China later helped more.
How long did it take you to, like from the very beginning until you could kind of have even just like a simple conversation to like understand other people and express yourself a little bit?
When I went to China initially, I thought that I was set. I thought I had a good foundation, but I realized I could not converse well because it's just different when you're there and people talk at full speed with different, you know, accents. I'd studied for a year, I think, solidly at least. And then in the short time that I was in China, I'd say after that, I was firmly like very comfortable talking with people and like much, much better off. So probably just a year and a half.
That gives people hope, I guess, like if they're trying to go to another country, you don't necessarily have to live there to get like the roots of the basic language, right? Yeah. You can kind of learn in another place and then move somewhere and pick it up pretty fast, like as you practice.
Yeah, like it helps to have like a bunch of vocab down and some basic ideas about grammar and sentence structure, and then go there and see it used.
When you got to China and you were living there, like obviously it's very different than living in the States.
It was the first foreign country I'd ever been to, but it was vastly different. And I didn't go like to Shanghai or somewhere has a Western part really. I went to like a very uniquely like very Chinese feeling place, which is Nanjing, and it was a shock, but exciting, like super exciting. I was with a small group of friends and foreigners who were all studying abroad too, so we were all experiencing the magic together and enjoying it. It was so much fun. Like it was some of my fondest early memories of traveling is then.
What kind of made you decide to leave China?
I was in China and I had visited South Korea because a couple of my friends were teaching English there. That was during my internship and I liked South Korea a lot. I fondly remember having called it clean China because some elements reminded me of China because it's an Asian country with Confucian values and some linguistic similarities and all that stuff. But it was like cleaner and more developed. So I was pretty impressed. I was like, this is more like a first world Asian country than I'd experienced in China.
How long did you end up staying in Korea for?
I stayed there for 3 years.
What about language? Because you were so like passionate about learning Chinese and then you moved over to Korea. Did you try to study Korean as well? Or?
I did, and there was this really cool program, I think it still exists, called Kolcom, and you can go study Korean for free if you donate like an hour of your time to a English language practice group. My second language brain had been dominated by Chinese, so it felt like I'd spent so much more time doing that. It was like hard to start yet another language.
Do you think that was kind of one of the reasons why you decided to leave Korea?
Definitely. But yeah, the Chinese, it felt like it was being wasted there. Like there's some people who speak Chinese there, but obviously speak Chinese more in a place like Taiwan or China. And I didn't want to go back to China. So I decided to travel and see Taiwan. And I think I had seen it before on a trip, but I decided to spend more time there to get a feel for it.
You moved to Taiwan after Korea. What did you think about Taiwan?
I thought it was a great place. I mean, it had like all the things that I really loved about China and using Chinese, and then something more and new that I was unfamiliar with, like a different culture. People are more polite. It's generally cleaner. There's really good transportation. You just feel stability. It has like a background of, with Japanese influences and other influences. So it was like that sense of wonderment came back.
When you first got to Taiwan, you were teaching English, right?
I was, yeah.
And you taught English in China for a bit as well, right?
Yeah, like tutoring, but not like at a job. I did the most of my English teaching in Korea.
Let's talk about the differences between being an English teacher in Korea and Taiwan.
There really aren't that many. The visa situation's almost the same. Maybe one small difference is in Korea, you can get your apartment immediately provided by your employer, whereas here you can't. The situation usually is that you need to go find it yourself, which your employer sometimes helps.
Taiwan is cheaper than living in Korea, right?
Yes.
So for the salary you get in Korea versus the salary you get in Taiwan, where would you say your money travels further?
I think it travels further here. If you travel in Taiwan, or even if you just live in a place that's maybe not Taipei, things are probably cheaper. You probably have more disposable income. But I don't think it's a lot more.
What are the averages you make in Korea versus in Taiwan?
For South Korea, it'll be probably 2.1, 2.2 million won. That includes like an apartment, probably.
Yeah.
Here, it'll probably be like 60,000 Taiwan dollars, which is roughly the same as 2,000 US dollars also. The difference being that you probably have to get your own apartment here.
So in Korea, it's pretty normal to get like 1 week of holidays in the winter and then 1 week in the summer. In addition to Korean holidays, there's like Seollal, which is like similar to Chinese New Year, where you get like 5 days, and then Chuseok, which is like the Mid-Autumn Festival for 5 days.
Yes.
So there's kind of like 4 main longer holidays, I guess you could call them. Like, is it similar in Taiwan?
Yes. But I think most places maybe don't give you any extra time off other than holidays. They might have off the contract, off the record negotiations to give you holidays. But usually the deal is you need to work it out with your employer and maybe go on Facebook or a social media group and advertise that you want somebody to cover your classes.
What are the qualifications you need to teach English? And like, I think this applies to most of Asia as well, right?
I think so. Yeah, the only exception I know to these qualification requirements is maybe like Vietnam and Cambodia, where you don't need much. Maybe not even to be a native speaker, and China, actually. So you need to, it's not necessarily that you need to be a native English speaker, but it's even more critical that you have a passport from select countries. And those countries usually are the United Kingdom, Ireland, New Zealand, Australia, the United States, Canada, South Africa. And then, in addition to that, a college degree, bachelor's at minimum. That means an associate's degree at a community college won't work. And then you absolutely can't have any criminal record.
For those that don't know, there is a stereotype about like English teachers in Asia. What would you say the general consensus would be?
I think generally it's probably leaning negative, like you are doing this because it is the easiest thing to do, and therefore you must be something of a failure back home because you didn't make it.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's complete nonsense. It just sort of doesn't consider so many things. That means like somebody who is a serious educator or who wanted to do this from the start won't get any real recognition for that, because there are a lot of people who are doing this as an opportunity to travel, you know, that probably help give it that name of being like an easy thing that people don't take serious. And obviously there are so many factors to consider about those countries, those passports, right, that I mentioned that are required for you to teach abroad. There's so many things going on in all those different countries and in those towns and in those families to consider that contribute to somebody wanting to leave.
A lot of people think like teaching English in Asia is kind of a dead-end job, right?
They definitely think you're going to be making the same salary forever and that you will do the same thing forever, and eventually you'll get so old that you can't do it because you'll be undesirable. There's some truth in that. If you bounce around to different jobs, you'll keep kind of getting generally the same salary, and probably eventually if you bounce around too much, they'll just start saying no when you get really old, like 60 or 70 or something. But if you stay at one place that you find that's good, they might even make you an owner. That's happened in the past in Taiwan and Korea, I'm assuming. And so there is like an avenue for upward mobility, and they'll pay you more, you know. There are even hardcore schools, they advertise them as such because they're all foreign run and make foreigners co-owner and stuff like that. So it's not really true. It's rarer for that to exist. It's more common for, you know, the bad schools, for sure. I would argue it's as true as like any other industry and any other company. It's almost the exact same, of the potential of being overworked and unhappy and being let go at the drop of a hat. It's just like a false narrative.
Your first stint here, you did end up leaving Taiwan. How long were you here?
That was 4 years.
Like, I remember talking to you at that time, and you were like pretty set that you weren't gonna live in Asia like forever, right?
Right.
You're pretty set that you're gonna return to America?
At that time, I thought that there were a lot of opportunities for somebody like me with a master's degree, and I had a much better connection to my family at that time, so I also wanted to be around them. And I thought that I could move up the North American ladder to a better salary and a better life with access to just maybe some of the negative aspects drove me a little bit towards America, because I had fantasized about this perfect life there and all the good things that were there, food and laws and me being an American citizen, and all that seemed very tempting to me.
What was it like going back? Like when you first got there, what did you feel?
I had extreme culture shock, for sure, like reverse culture shock, because not only had I sort of not lived in America for 10 years, and so I wasn't used to things because of that, but also because of COVID, and everything seemed to have changed, like political views and culture and all this stuff had all changed dramatically. So it was like extremely hostile and dangerous feeling for me.
Did you feel like an outsider returning home?
Yes, I felt very strange and out of place.
Yeah, it must have been really hard to make connections with people because I assume, did they really talk about or were they curious about your time in Asia a lot?
Very infrequently were people like really curious. It was like a major side note to them. I mean, they probably just saw me and talked to me and got a sense that I was just another American.
But you do change, like living abroad, a lot of you changes, right?
Yeah, especially if you were married and like deep into the culture and spoke the language a lot like I was. So it really even made it even more intense feeling.
I guess that was also another reason for returning.
Yeah, I was married and had a bad falling out with my ex, and that made it less tempting to be here. If it's a bad experience, obviously you're going to kind of associate the place that you were in with the person.
When you got to America, you continued to teach, right?
So I taught at a middle school, and I taught 7th grade, and I definitely was used to teaching, so I felt like it was the logical thing to do, was like to go see what it's like back home.
How was teaching back home in America?
It was very different. Some aspects are similar because they're kids, and I was teaching English, and I had taught English, even literature here in Taiwan. So there were similarities, but it's very, very different because of culture and because of the state of things in the US and the requirements of the state of schools and lack of funding and all that stuff. We can make a separate video about this altogether.
So you know, like the salary in Taiwan, like let's say 60,000 Taiwan dollars,
Right.
versus like what is the average salary of an American teacher?
The average salary is probably around 50,000 US dollars per year, maybe about twice as much.
America is a lot more expensive, right, in general. So do you think like teachers there are paid what they should be? Is it enough to make like a good living?
No, it's not enough to make a good living. It's either just above the poverty line or at the poverty line, considering, yeah, all the expenses.
Let's look at like the overall. So we'll just like lump Korea and Taiwan together because I think it's pretty similar like all over Asia as well.
Yes.
Versus teaching in America, like what is a better lifestyle overall?
I would say that it's much better here, especially because both Korea and Taiwan have national health insurance programs, which means that you get money taken out of your salary, which is not a lot. And basically every health problem you'll have is very, very protected and covered in that plan. And then cost of living as far as like apartment, you'll pay less in rent, you'll pay less for food, maybe not shopping and eating the same meals that you would back home, but eating local stuff will be way, way cheaper if you can adapt. So the quality of life is better here, and I think everybody knows and feels like they have stability here.
Like let's say Korea and Taiwan. If you go to South Korea, you're right next to North Korea. If you go to Taiwan, there's threat of attack, obviously, because of the way the world is right now. When you think about just personal safety, what would you say?
Well, particularly Taiwan and Korea in day-to-day life are extremely safe. You won't really, as a foreigner, have any issue with people trying to hurt you or steal from you. I think my bike is left unlocked like right now as we speak on the front porch, and I'll never worry about it. Something that happened recently was I left very expensive music equipment in front of a bus station that was untended. There's one woman behind a counter in the shop, and then there's like seats outside, and nobody's watching those seats. Nobody touched it, and I went far away. I went to a 7-Eleven and used the bathroom, got a coffee, took my time, eyes completely off my stuff, came back, and of course it hadn't been touched. People just don't steal. It's not a thing, and it causes shame if you do. So they're driven not to, and it's great. It's like the best outcome of, you could argue, a shame-conscious society.
It's funny because like I've lived in Korea for 10 years now, and that's what I expect now. My standards got so high that I don't worry about like putting my wallet on the table, going to the bathroom, none of that. And I mean literally putting the wallet on the table.
That's also mind-blowing.
Yeah, going to the bathroom, coming back to it, and it's going to be there.
Yes.
Which is nuts.
In fact, sometimes in Taiwan when I've done that, like left my wallet somewhere, people will grab it and run up to me and say, hey, you left this, which is crazy to me. Like they're looking out for me for no reason. That might not be true in places like Vietnam and China and whatever, but generally like being stabbed or being held at gunpoint, I think those are way, way, way lessened in generally speaking. They do happen, but they're way, way less. So there's that like driving force that makes you feel safe in these places. There obviously is this threat and nobody can predict what will happen in the future exactly about the threat of China or the threat of North Korea. My argument's always been why come here when there's this giant threat is because I have not felt very safe in the US. Even around family and friends, I've felt like instability. Friends and family losing their job or being financially unstable or mentally unstable or both. And so I felt immediate threats from people and the environment around me in the US.
What about safety in America, like day-to-day safety? Like the world's technically most developed country.
Yeah, non-existent on that level. Like if you leave your wallet out, it's going to be gone. You should expect it to be gone and you should scold yourself for being stupid to leave it out. You know, you even have to go through steps. They sell like home security systems in America like crazy because people break in. And that's also something that's become so normal that you scold yourself when you don't lock your doors or you don't take those precautions. People steal from each other and don't have a sense of morality around that at all. I don't know how they justify it, but maybe they think like this person's well off and I'm not well off and I need more. But it's not an ideal society to live in for me, now that I've experienced a place like this especially.
So how long did you live in America before coming back here?
This short stint that I did back home was a year, like one exact year.
So you're literally planning on living the rest of your life there, and you only spent 1 year.
Yes.
Before you had to come back.
And a lot happened in that year that was bad, and that helped drive me right back here, because I knew in the back of my head that it was an option.
Yeah, we don't have to go into like detail, because I know you've been through a lot, but like after 1 year in America, let's look at your mentality.
I think summarizing all my experiences and justifying why I wanted to come back here and feeling comfortable with that decision, I told myself, because I'm a very idealistic person and I want to help, I want to be a good person, and I tried to do that to some degree in America because I had a sense when I went back that there were many problems and maybe I can help somehow. But I realized that the skill set that I have and my interests and my ability to teach English specifically and speak Chinese were much better used here in Taiwan. I wouldn't have those feelings of being out of place. I could use my Chinese, I could use my background knowledge of Asia a lot more and feel comfortable.
How do you feel now that you're back in Taiwan?
I feel like I got my bearings again and I feel like really comfortable now. It's a new experience because I'm not with my wife anymore and a lot of my memories revolved around that. And I think initially that was really hard, but now I see a path and find myself like more stable and I have this new job coming up. It really gives you a sense of purpose and direction. So I feel really good and hopeful.
That's awesome. Like before when you came here, you always thought about returning to America.
I did.
What about now? Do you think about going back home or?
Not at all. I don't think about it at all. I like to never say never and keep that policy and keep it open, but it doesn't call to me at all in any way at the moment, and I can't imagine that it will for the next 5 years or whatever, or maybe even 10. Right now, if I look 10 years ahead about Taiwan being my home, I think it could be, I think it will be, at least my home base.
If you go way back and you just never came abroad at all, you just stayed in America, what do you think you'd be doing right now? Who would Eamon be?
I think somehow I'd be probably involved in language, but there's no telling if I would have this prospects of like being at a university. I might be okay, but I could also just be floundering and not finding a place for me in my calling.
So if you compare this Eamon to that Eamon, what do you think?
Much happier being the same, and I think, yeah.
If you stick it out in this industry in Taiwan, do you think you can live a meaningful and fulfilling life?
I think you absolutely can. People have had that reality for a long time, and I think it'll continue, especially with like recent policies about increasing the amount of English teaching going on.
Some people might stumble upon this interview and they might be feeling lost in life. There's a lot of people that are struggling to find happiness, or they might just think that where they are is not right for them as a person, and they might want to consider teaching in Asia. What advice would you tell those people?
Try to hold on to what you remember about your home country and what you have to introduce to people and share, but be really open. I can't emphasize that enough. Be willing to change the way you think and be open, because otherwise you'll risk being perpetually in culture shock and unhappy. It happens to so many people who stay a short time and hate it, hate their experience and hate their time here, and go immediately back to the US and don't like it there either, probably. Be open and be optimistic and be nice.
It was great to see Eamon overcome his recent hardships and make a complete transformation to start his life abroad a second time, but this time with knowledge and wisdom from the previous decades of ups and downs. I hope that people were able to learn some new things in this interview, especially about learning a language, living and teaching in Asia, and how it compares to America. This is my last interview video before returning to Korean content with my wife Yujin. If you enjoyed these interview videos the past 2 weeks and want to see more of them, please let me know in the comments, as I'd love to keep making them if people have interest. Either way, look forward to future Korean content, and take care of yourselves.